Hello, welcome to today's webinar, Engaging from a Distance, Connecting Employees During COVID-19. We hope you like the intro music and definitely appreciate everybody for joining us today. So my name is Katie Jordan and I will be co-moderating today alongside Kristen Vazo. Say hello, Kristen.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for being here.
Kristen and I are principals at Verasolve, an integrated marketing, PR, social, and strategic communications firm. And talking with clients, partners, friends, family, and basically everyone. We're all looking for new ways to stay connected and engaged. Today's expert panelists come with some great ideas. DC Fray, B&A, and Verasolve will bring you some valuable tips to keep your employees engaged and feeling appreciated.
So we have a few housekeeping notes. So we want to keep this webinar interactive. So we're going to be asking some audience questions. So please go ahead and type your responses in the chat. We'll also be putting out a few fun polls like we did when you first came in. And so we're actually going to look at those results. Yeah, it looks like a lot of people are watching Tiger King and something else. So that's cool. Awesome. So our goal is to wrap this up in about 45 minutes. So we're going to do a little moderating. We're going to do about 30 minutes with the panelists and then 10 minutes for Q&A at the end. So feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation, but we won't be answering any until the end. So there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen if you're on a PC, or maybe at the top if you're on a tablet or a phone. So just enter your questions there and then we will do our best to address them at the end.
Okay, great. To share the rest of the poll results, it looks like most people everybody's cooking, so that's a great thing. And then people are working out because they still want to eat junk food, so great. So thank you all for participating in that one. Keep an eye out for a few more coming up. So we are definitely excited to introduce our expert panelists. We have Alana Gutton, Marketing and PR Manager with Verasolve, Kelly Sinclair Baltz, the VP of Talent and Operations with B&A, and Robert Kinsler, CEO of United Fray, DC Fray. We'll be hearing from Alana and Rob shortly, but Kelly will be kicking things off. So please welcome Kelly Sinclair, the Vice President of Talent and Operations for B&A. She's focused on aligning the company's talent acquisition strategy with B&A's corporate vision, values, and culture. She manages B&A operations and leads corporate morale initiatives with a focus on giving back to the community. So everybody please welcome Kelly.
Welcome.
All right, thank you, Katie, and good afternoon, everyone. So the first thing that I wanted to go over was our guiding principles for managing this situation. So when this really all started to come to a head and we realized that we were going to have to completely transition to a remote workforce, our management team got together to kind of think through how are we going to manage the situation. So coming out of that, we didn't originally plan on having guiding principles, but they really ended up being guiding principles of, how we've handled everything. So first and foremost, our employees' health and well-being is of the utmost importance. So every decision that we want to make, that's what our priority should be. The second one is minimizing any disruption to our projects. We're a government contractor, so we have a lot of people out in the field. Obviously, our customers and our customer service, and back to our employees. We want to minimize the disruption to their work and their personal lives as much as possible. The next one is to increase communication because we don't have people, in the office together. You're not, passing each other in the hallways, riding the elevators with each other, or having, as many in-person meetings. We wanted to make sure that we maintained our level of communication, but, also increase it. The next thing, and kind of similar to just not being in person, is we want to continue to recognize hard work and top performers. And this is something I think you really have to plan for. It's easy to say, walk by somebody's desk and thank them, or be in a meeting and say, great job. Again, we don't have those opportunities as much, and people are doing really great work. And sometimes they're doing it in, a more difficult environment than they're used to doing it. Some people have great home office setups, and then other people are working in their kitchen with their little kid running around them, and they're still doing a great job. So it's really important to kind of plan and make time to do that and to recognize your top performers. Also team building, employee engagement. Again, I mean, at B&A, we do so much to bring our teams together and celebrate our successes and just kind of do team building activities. We really didn't want to lose sight of that. We didn't want our corporate culture to suffer as we moved to a virtual environment. So something else that we wanted to plan for. You do have to get much more creative, and I know the other speakers are going to be talking through some of those items. But you know, that was a top priority for us going into all of this. And then lastly, maintaining our focus on corporate social responsibility and philanthropy. We do a lot in the community. You know, a lot of those activities, though, they are all traditionally in the past, they were all in person. So we wanted to make sure to plan for that and continue to give back, you know, even though we were all working from home. And when we sat down, you know, we did challenge each other that in every difficult situation, there is some sort of opportunity. So however hard that is to think about right now, and especially when this was all happening, you know, we struggled to come up with something, but, you know, ultimately we all collectively agreed that, you know, if we really respond to the situation well and we manage it well, we do actually have the opportunity to build a better relationship with our employees and increase the trust with our people. So, you know, having that, the idea that we can come out on the other end, you know, better than where we started, along with these guiding principles have really helped us kind of navigate, you know, what really is an unprecedented environment that we're working in today. All right, and I assume everyone saw the poll question pop up. Give you a second to answer that. But in you know, immediate COVID-19 response, you know, at B&A, and that's the company I'm with, as I mentioned in the intro, we're very fortunate that we did already have a crisis management team established. So we had all of our team members established, you know, our policies and procedures and how we're going to operate. So if you don't have a crisis management team established, I would highly recommend doing that. It enabled us to be very nimble in setting this up and activate what we already had in place as soon as this all happened. So our crisis management team was assembled really to deal with any COVID-19 related issues or incidents that came up. And as soon as we stood up our crisis management team, we did notify all of our employees that if there's any COVID related incident or issue that's come up, whether, you know, it's in your personal lives or in the work environment, you know, please report those to us so we can manage those. And if communication needs to go out because you went to dinner with a family member that, you know, eventually tested positive and you went to the office, you know, we need to make sure that we get all the necessary communication out. So having that crisis management team enabled us to, you know, pull everything together into one place, and we were easily able to communicate, you know, the procedures of what to do out to the entire B&A team. The next thing that we did was we launched our B&A weekly pulse survey. I know a lot of people are doing this. If you're not, it's super helpful to kind of gauge where everyone's at. It's a quick survey. We don't put more than 5 or 6 questions in the survey each week. So, and a lot of them are yes and no. So it takes 30 seconds to a minute to fill it out. You know, I ask a lot of questions of how are you doing? Are you stressed? When we first transitioned to telework, you know, do you have the IT accommodations that you need? You know, now that it's been, you know, we're, I think on our 8th week now, you know, how has the communication with your manager been? So getting kind of a quick yes, no pulse check on all of these things, we can kind of see where people are at. And if their manager needs to check in with them, if they're not doing too well or they have too much on their plate, or if we need to do something like send them an HDMI adapter. You know, you'd be surprised at the things that come out of these surveys that, you know, we can do, and there's such easy changes, but unless you ask, you don't know. So that was another thing that was that's been very helpful to kind of get us through this situation. And I think, you know, it's a good check-in with the people, and that another way to show them that we care. All right, and then next, something totally new that we did is we did launch our B&A Cares program, and this was completely in response to the pandemic and moving to a virtual environment. So our Cares program is focused on promoting and supporting the entire, the well-being of the entire B&A team. So a couple initiatives under this program. First thing we did is it's kind of unique. So we engaged a registered counselor, and she's really spearheading the outreach, I'll say, of the B&A Cares program. So we provided her with the contact information of all of our B&A employees, and she reached out to every single one of them. Some of them are doing well, you know, she called them and she was just checking in, asking, you know, how are you doing? What can B&A help you during this time? Some people were doing great. They were thrilled to be teleworking. They were, you know, sick of commuting or, you know, paying tolls or whatever it may be. So, you know, we took them off the list. We checked in with them. And other people were struggling, you know, whether they had kids at home and they were struggling working with their kids around, or, you know, we had several people who were living alone in small apartments in the city and they were just stressed out and anxious. So for those people, she's continuing to check in with them week after week. They look forward to her call. And, you know, the nice thing is, when, you know, she's talking to them and an issue comes out, she can actually send them tailored follow-up emails after she speaks to them. So if it's somebody who's, you know, a little bit anxious and stressed about the situation, if they're watching the news too much or something, she follows up and she sends them stress management tools to cope with the stress. So that's been awesome, I think, for the people, and also from a management perspective. You know, we have a nice, it's another way, more in-depth pulse survey, I'll say, but we do have a good understanding of, you know, how the general population of the whole B&A team, how they're doing, and what is, you know, a tough time for a lot of people. We did also send a care package out. It was a variety meat package from Omaha Steaks. We did deliver that to everyone's homes. It went out about 2 weeks after we all started teleworking, right when the grocery store shelves were completely cleared out of meat. So it was perfect timing. That was, you know, obviously well received. If you can deliver something to your employees' houses, you know, it's a pretty nice gesture. We'll have to coordinate and does cost some money, but it was, you know, got a lot of very nice emails after that. And then more recently, we sent a B&A bread-in mask to all of our employees' homes. You know, nice item to have right now for going out into public, but it was also kind of a fun thing to send out. We got a lot of fun pictures of, you know, people posting it on social media or just sending it amongst their teams once they got their masks. So little things like that, they do bring people together, and it is nice to get a little package at home. The last thing is the philanthropy piece. I know I hit on that in one of the previous slides. You know, as part of the B&A Cares program, we partnered with a local restaurant to support local businesses, and a nonprofit that we do a lot of work with, Hope for Henry, to send meals to hospital workers. And we did this on behalf of the entire B&A staff. So we delivered meals to the Children's National in DC. We delivered meals to Nova Alexandria Hospital in Virginia, and we're sending meals to a hospital in Maryland within the next week. And again, when we do this, we're, you know, we're promoting it on social media, and obviously it's a great thing to give back to the community, but we're also letting the B&A employees know that, you know, we are doing this on behalf of you as part of this program. So kind of a fun picture. I cut off the faces of the hospital workers there on the left, but you know, that was one of the meal deliveries that was happened in the last couple of weeks. And the last thing I want to hit on really is the evolution of communication. So I speak kind of more on the B&A front, so this may or may not apply to you all, but in the beginning, I feel like I was, you know, it was information overload with CDC guidelines, you know, how to wash your hands, which was great. You know, all these things need to go out, stay 6 feet apart, wear a mask, which was good informational stuff that, you know, there's such a heavy push in the beginning. And then, you know, but it was also kind of intertwined with all of this uncertain messaging. I think the phrase is uncertain times and, you know, the evolving situation and unprecedented situation that we're dealing with. It was kind of scary and eerie for a lot of people. So what we tried to do is, once people started accepting kind of the new norm, we did try to change our messaging to be a little bit more positive. You know, what is your silver lining in all this? Did you not used to get home to be able to eat dinner with your kids, and now you're home for that? Or have you taken up a new hobby? You know, a lot of people are gardening, or they're working out more, or they're able to walk with their significant other more. So we did change our messaging, which was good. I think people were they started to be kind of sick of hearing, you know, all of the messaging that was going on in the beginning. And there was also, again, an acceptance of the new normal. So we didn't need a message quite as much kind of in the middle few weeks there. I'm seeing a major shift again now with the reopening plans that are coming out, and obviously they're state by state. And if you're a Virginia business, I think phase 1 starts May 15th. So I think there's a lot more uncertainty that's bubbling up again. A lot more questions of what happens next. When do we go back? Is it going to be safe to return to work? So I think that, you know, major push and over communication that we had in the beginning, I think it needs to start happening again. At least that's what we're trying to do internally to answer some of the questions that are coming out. We don't have all the answers right now, right? But in order to try and get in front of this and try to be able to answer some of the questions with all of them unknowns out there, we're starting to work on a reopening plan, which I think is going to be pretty extensive once we think through, you know, all the different scenarios that we possibly can. But I think it's the best way to kind of equip you to be able to communicate what is necessary to your people right now. And I threw a few questions on here to just get you thinking, but, you know, do you have specific target dates to reopen? You know, there's a lot of your employees that might have to make accommodations if they have kids at home, or they're caring for elderly, or, you know, maybe they don't feel comfortable riding the metro anymore, or whatever it is. They want to start thinking through those options. Are you going to require all of your staff to come to the office? Or, you know, are there only certain people? We do a rotational program. Maybe some people are allowed telework. And if they won't come, what are you going to do? They just, you know, downright refuse and say, I don't feel safe yet. Is that acceptable? Are you going to be supplying masks and supplies and, you know, hand sanitizer, all of those things that we need to start thinking through, whether you're going to take people's temperatures. Are you restricting areas of your office? So common areas like kitchens, conference rooms, are those going to be off limits? Are you going to allow visitors? Are your desks 6 feet apart? So that's something else that we were looking at internally. Some of ours aren't, and then there's some that are. So there's so many different things to think through, and, you know, we're not going to be able to think through all of them in advance, but, you know, as much as we can do that in advance, I think it'll all help us equipped to eventually transition back to where we were a little bit more easily. And hopefully you can answer your employees' questions a little bit better if you start thinking through what your reopening plans are.
Awesome. Thanks, Kelly. Sounds like you guys were pretty well prepared for, you know, responding to this. So I think having those guiding principles was probably one of the most important parts. So thank you for sharing all that. So now let's take a look at these poll results. Okay, great. So the majority of you are seeing that culture is very important, and some people are now saying, at least no one's saying not a top priority today. So I think especially now it's true, it's very important. So all right, thanks guys. So next up, our next panelist is going to be Rob Kinsler. Rob, thanks for being here. Since 2009, he's been making fun possible. So he's the founder and CEO of DC Fray, which is a sports league, events, and media company. So he specializes in helping companies like yours and individuals use play as a catalyst to transform lives, build communities, and make a positive impact in the world. So Rob, thanks so much for joining us today. We appreciate it. So you have the floor.
All right, thanks for that intro. I hope everybody's having a great afternoon today. I'm here to speak a little bit about the importance of culture. So on that poll, I was definitely in the top 83% of sharing that culture is vitally important. And you know, the harsh reality is that the best time to plant a tree is 30 years ago, right? But the second best time is today. So if you were in that group where you didn't identify that culture is super important, or you know that it's important, but you maybe haven't gotten started on it, the reality is that this environment, this massive muscle movement, is the best time that we've ever had, right? If not now, when? So it's not too late to dig into culture and to make that a way that you distinguish your business from others and that you build that team morale. And so I'm going to touch on just some really high level elements of what really is culture. And then separately from that, what are a few really tangible action items that you can take away from this webinar that you can implement immediately? What are some tips and really actionable items that you can run with? There's so much about culture and so deep down the rabbit hole you can go. I wanted to try to keep pretty high level. And so fundamentally, what is culture, right? People talk about it all the time. If you boil it down, most will say that ultimately culture is how we do things around here, right? It's our actions and our behaviors on a day-to-day basis. And for the teams that have the strongest culture, it often comes back to being really intentional and declarative about what you value as a company. And so some companies are very fast moving, innovative, and they value moving fast and breaking things, which would be a Facebook style culture, or they're more reserved. And it's really important to have an environment of safety and diligence, and that may be the medical field. And so really it's about what is important and what are the values that are going to allow you to achieve your mission. And so for us here at Fray, we have values of fun, play, positivity, gratitude, community, and innovation. And we just recently added a seventh value of hustle with everything that's going on around us. And so for us, what we've learned is it's really important to take those values and to track them back to specific action items and specific behaviors that you expect of yourself and of your team. And so, you know, values are a dime a dozen. Almost every company, I would imagine, has them written down somewhere. But the real question becomes, how many are living them on a daily basis? It's a refrain you hear often that, you know, Enron had values on their wall, but we know they didn't live up to them. And if you were to guess, it would be interesting. If anybody wants to type into the chat box, I'd love to see what some of the guesses people might have of what Enron's values were. So I'll keep going, but if you want to drop some in there. So again, it's more than just having values written down. You have to live them. And so the key to doing that is sitting down with your team, picking one of the values that you've identified that's important, that's in your handbook, that's on your wall, and really coming up and brainstorming with your team, what are the 5 to 10 behaviors that reinforce that behavior or that reinforce that value, right? We just got our first guest, and she nailed it right on the head. I think it's Avita. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Integrity and honesty were 2 of Enron's values, which clearly they were not living, right? Their whole scandal was about a lack of integrity and a lack of honesty. And so that's what happens when it's simply something that's on the wall. And for Enron, actually, it wasn't even just in a handbook or on the wall someplace. It was in their lobby. When you came into their building, their billion-dollar building, it was right there plastered over the reception desk. And so it's got to be put into action if it's going to be real. So obviously you see a word cloud here of some common values that companies have, but really it's about what are the values that you have. And if anybody wants to drop some of their own company values into the chat, we could use that as an example. But a great example from Fray, one of our values is gratitude. So it looks like we've got a poll that just popped up here. Have you taken active steps to adapt your culture to a remote workforce? So we'll be getting into that a little bit more on my next slide, but it'll be great to see who's doing that. And so back to the example of taking a value and connecting it to behaviors. Fray, with the value of positivity and gratitude, we wrap our behavior to that value of every full team meeting we have where everyone is the full stand-ups. Everybody opens up with one piece of gratitude, positivity, or shout out. Doesn't have to be a huge groundbreaking thing. It can be something as small as somebody made coffee this morning in the office and it was really nice that they left an extra pot. Or it could be I closed a sales deal yesterday that I didn't think I was going to, and really anything in between. And in today's world, with everything going on around us with COVID, it's even more important to be focusing on those little wins that you have and the small pieces of gratitude, to not take any of the good things we still have for granted. So as crazy as it may be with the kids running around at home, or as hard as your task is to accomplish in this new reality, what are the small pieces that you can be grateful for? So again, embracing your core values, taking those values back to actions is kind of the core of engaging team members. But the challenge, and you can move to our next slide, is how do you do that now that we're remote, right? It's easy to have some of these things in place. And the key is it's all about adapting what you were doing before in person to a new medium. And so some things are going to transfer really easily, like our gratitude we can continue to do at the start of our Zoom meetings. But our positivity gong is a little bit harder. So we had a positivity gong in the office that people would go and ring when they had a piece of good news. We can't exactly do that in this new virtual environment. People can ring it, but no one's going to hear it. And if someone rings a gong in an empty office, did they really ring a gong at all? I don't know. So it's about how can we adapt that? And so we came up with a way of creating a Slack channel where we virtually ring the gong and share that piece of positive news. And everybody knows that we've made it really clear that our expectation is when somebody does that, when somebody posts in that channel, your notification needs to be turned on, and it's important. It's important to go celebrate with them and to have that little win. And so engaging in a time of COVID is really about taking what you were already doing really well and adapting it to a new medium and getting really creative with it. The other key to that too is making sure that you're talking to your team and that you're not trying to do this alone. Come up with, set a meeting on the calendar, invite those team members in, and set the agenda. How do we adapt the things that we used to do? What did we used to love in the office? And is there a way we can reinvent that here virtually? The other part of culture in general, whether it's pre-COVID or post-COVID, is just about the level of intentionality. Culture doesn't just happen. Well, let me rephrase that. Good culture doesn't just happen. Typically, if your culture is just naturally evolved, it's probably not as strong as you want it to be or that you would like it to be. And so the key there is intentionality. And Kelly touched on a lot of great things that you can do in an intentional way, the newsletters, the tiny pulses. Here, I've got just a few that I wanted to go over with you as well about the biggest challenge of doing those items in a remote environment. So remote culture, remote team building, one of the main scarcities that we have, that we lack, is we don't have our spontaneous conversations that we used to have in the office. Right? We don't randomly run into people in the kitchenette. We don't come into the office at the same time and happen to strike up a conversation. The early birds that like to get to the office early and typically connect a little bit before the rest of the team gets there, or the ones that like to stay late and work later in the day, though we get robbed of those opportunities. And so bringing a level of intentionality to your remote team to recreate those opportunities. And so there's a few ways of doing that. The first is to try to get as much of your interaction with your team as you can out of the digital text typing realm. We already rely on email too heavily, even in in-person work environments. And now our tendency in the COVID time is to do so even more, right? Is to write the email to the team member, is to text into the Slack channel. We're using type and typed communication more than ever. There's rarely, if ever, a spontaneous side conversation that kicks up in a text-based conversation about a task. It's just not something that happens. You're not talking about a deliverable and suddenly like, hey, did you happen to see Tiger King last night? It just doesn't really happen. So pulling yourself out of the text and embracing video meetings, embracing video messages even. And ultimately, the most powerful tool that often gets overlooked is embracing the phone call, right? Is calling that person instead of writing them that email. There can be some issues around availability, obviously, and you want to work through those. But my general mantra for my team and the teams that we've been working with is when in doubt, call. If you just got an email that seemed a little confusing or maybe even a little harsh, instead of writing back, call them back. If you're writing an email that feels like maybe it might come off a little harsh, instead pick up the phone. Or just in general, if you've got a project that you want to work on, pick up the phone and talk through it versus kicking it off with an email. That's going to give you an opportunity to have more casual conversation, to reduce miscommunication, and improve those opportunities to connect spontaneously. The other is to be super intentional about empowering your team to find opportunities for spontaneous connection. And a really good way of doing that is having an opportunity for your team to create affinity groups. And so an affinity group is really just a fancy way of an interest group. So maybe everyone that really enjoys Tiger King or sci-fi movies or Star Wars can get together and self-organize. A great way of doing this is when you're either onboarding new team members to ask their interests, or obviously with the big muscle movement we've all gone through, send out a poll and ask your team, what are you interested in? What are those things that you like to do outside of work? And see if there's a critical mass around 1, 2, 3 of the different activities. You generally want to keep them pretty high level, like fitness or cooking or travel. Makes it a little bit easier for people to engage. But after a robust amount of time where this is developed, you'll start to see that sometimes the groups can get really specific and people can geek out. And it just gives one more opportunity for people to build a relationship outside of just those direct task-based communications. And then the other is to be really intentional about creating those opportunities as a company to come together and to do fun things. And we don't have that opportunity in a remote environment like we used to. And so how do you replace that happy hour that you guys used to go to on a Friday afternoon? How do you replace the camaraderie that would happen after the stand-up meeting where people would hang out? Think about where your company naturally had those moments and think about how you could potentially recreate them. And if your company didn't really have those moments, now is a great time to start from scratch. The keys around being intentional around scheduling fun activities is you want to make sure that it's primarily on company time. Quote, mandatory fun rarely gets the buy-in and achieves the goals that you want if it's 7 o'clock at night when they're dealing with dinner or kids. So can you put it at 4 o'clock? Can you put it at 4:30? Maybe you bridge the gap a little bit where it's mostly on company time, but maybe bleeds into personal time as well. You can have some limited success. We have clients that have success with scheduling time outside of work hours if it's truly a value-based offering. So for instance, a morning yoga can be a great offering for team members to come together, or potentially a Saturday afternoon or evening cocktail hour where you're bringing in a bartender. Thinking about how you can do remote activities effectively is about embracing the team and the interests that you have, being super intentional about it. And you can take it in-house. You can have someone on your HR engagement team tackle it. Maybe with how things have shifted for you, there may be somebody with a little bit more bandwidth on your team right now. You could put them in charge. But you also have the opportunity to go remote and to have someone else facilitate this for you. I mean, that's where Fray comes in with a lot of our clients, is we're that outside source. And the pros of an outside source coming in to facilitate is typically they've got it down to a science. They know the pitfalls of how some of these events and activities run and how to bring the best out of people. It also really, the biggest perk is that it's not just one more responsibility now for someone on your team who probably is juggling a lot, right? It also can help defer the formation of cliques where the person and the people that come to the event are really just that person's friend group already. It can help create a more level playing field for people to be interested. And then often the groups like Fray and other companies that are doing these activities just have an experience of making it fun, bringing a little bit of extra wow. And having an outside host who's not willing to ham it up or not scared to ham it up helps the team members loosen up and bring their selves to it as well. So those are just a few things that you can take away today. Be super intentional about how you want to show up. What are the fun activities that would be interesting for your group, for your team members? When in doubt, call. The phone is your friend. Do not get stuck in email. We already have our email inbox dominate our day. Now in the remote world, it's even more so. So try to get that as closed as possible and pick up the phone. So that's what I've got. If there's any questions, and I'd love to see what the results of the poll were, Kristen.
Katie, are you able to release that? Oh, there we go. Rob, can you see?
Yeah, so have you taken an active step? 61% have, awesome. Only 3% say no, and 35% kind of, we're doing something. And then the 3%, oh my God, no, please help me. Hopefully some of these tips are helpful. And certainly if you're looking for extra assistance, you can reach out to me. My contact info will be shared. And this is what Fray is doing for a whole slew of different clients. We've got a school district in Denver that we're helping 800 teachers find their rhythm. Helping locally here in DC, Clark Construction. They're essential workers and are under a lot of stress that they've engaged with us to bring some fun elements. But whether you do it in-house or out-house, just do it. Just make sure that you're showing your team, like Kelly talked about, that you care and that you're trying. And it'll go a long way.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Rob. I love kind of what you guys are doing. It's exciting to hear about the stuff that you guys are doing and get your ideas and thoughts. So I have a question for the audience. If you guys want to type your responses into the chat. So I'd like to know what type of events and activities are working well for you and your team right now. And if we can talk about that at the end, and we'll go over what you guys are saying. Just love to see what fun, crazy
virtual happy hours there. That's a great one. Are you guys actually bringing your drinks to the virtual happy hour and asking people why they brought what they brought?
Looks like yes.
It can be fun to see what people's tastes are. And early on during craziness, there were a lot of people saying it was the last thing in my fridge that I found from 5 parties ago. So I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Trivia happy hour, that's a great one. There's some great tools online to really facilitate fun. There's 2 really good ones. Kahoot.it is great, and then CrowdPurr, P-U-R-R, is another great tool. We use both of those tools for our clients as well, but they're available to anyone. We do a coffee mug photo engagement activity. Fun. It's actually really fun to see all the coffee mugs people send. Nice.
Everyone in the company do coffee break.
Here's my coffee mug from this morning, coming at you from Annapolis, Maryland here.
Nice. I wish I had mine. Okay, awesome. Thanks guys for sharing that. We appreciate it. So we already took a look at the poll results. So now let's talk to our final panelists.
So our final panelist today is Alana Gutton, a marketing and PR manager at Verasolve. Alana works in an advisory and hands-on capacity with businesses throughout the DMV. She regularly cultivates solutions with clients to keep their employees connected through a variety of methods. Alana currently works from home with 2 rambunctious children, 2 nosy dogs, and 1 tolerant husband. So welcome, Alana.
Hi, everybody. I don't have a mug, but I have a cool straw. We've been really into cool straws in our house.
Paper?
So great to see everybody, and thanks for all the participation. I hope we can keep it coming. I'm going to be looking to share some resources that you guys would like to share with the group as well. Today I'm going to be talking about some tools to keep employees engaged, and there might be a little bit of overlap just to summarize some of the great ideas that Robert and Kelly already shared. So it looks like we have another poll. Do you have a company newsletter? So that's the first question. And then how would you categorize your company's employee engagement efforts? So just take a quick moment to answer that. So I'll start by talking about newsletters. This might be something that many of you are already doing, but if you're not already doing, we highly recommend doing it. We also recommend expanding your efforts a little bit more and using it differently now that we're dealing with the COVID telework situation. So it's a great way to keep people engaged and informed about all different kinds of issues that are going on internally. It's also a fun way to engage individual employees and recognize them, show off some team accomplishments as well. Milestones such as birthdays, company anniversaries, if there's a birth in somebody's family, that can really make people feel special. Some of the resources we've used for newsletters are Constant Contact, MailChimp, and iContact. And if you want to share in the chat a resource that's worked really well for you for your newsletters, that would be great. And these kinds of formats have templates inside of them to make your newsletters really pop and look a lot more clean and professional. The next thing we'll talk about is intranet or an employee app. If that's something that you already have that works well, you'll probably want to keep using what you already have. And we don't want to throw too many new things at people at once. But some of these kinds of applications have special features that you can use to enhance it. For example, integrating a new fun theme, using images, adding more messaging beyond just the basic HR components. And we've seen people use SharePoint and Microsoft Teams for this very effectively. And again, if there's an intranet thing that you want to share, that would be great. I'm trying to see get response. Thanks, Maya. So you said it's similar to MailChimp, but it has many of the same capabilities. Okay, cool. I haven't heard of that one. So there are a lot of different resources out there that you can use, and it's great to talk to people about kind of the pros and cons, and there are always various levels. So you can pay for the highest level if you have a lot of users, or if you want to just try out the free version. So that's something you can kind of research and play around with. The other thing we recommend is having direct calls with leadership. Again, as Robert spoke about, we really want to try to get that visual connection or that voice connection beyond just email. It's really important. It helps employees feel like their contributions matter. And it really provides that time to check in and see, are people, doing really well with this? Are they, as Kelly mentioned, loving the short commute or the no commute? Or they just feel like little children are tugging on them all day and they just really need some time to process it. So it can be very meaningful for leadership to just have quick calls with people, or quick calls with teams to say, oh, you know, on that FEMA contract that you guys just completed that project, great job. Just those little things really go a long way. And so we're doing a video call today using Zoom, but there are a lot of different resources you can use for video calling, and you want to kind of weigh the pros and cons of the different features and even the security of the different features, and the different platforms. I know that some colleagues I have that work in the government can't use Zoom because of the security concerns, so that might be a consideration as well for like a government contractor. But Zoom, Google Hangouts, Skype, WebEx, Uber even has a conference line called Uber Conference. So you want to consider the pros and cons of all of the different platforms. So messaging channels, Robert was talking about Slack. We also use Slack at Verasolve pretty frequently. And there are some others such as GChat and Skype. And this helps to kind of recreate that water cooler type of environment. So you're having you feel a little bit more like you're having a conversation with people. Feels a little bit more informal, and you can just kind of keep the flow going rather than, you know, a really formal type of email. So one of the nice things that you can do within these channels is for those affinity groups that Rob was talking about, you can use these to create those affinity groups right there. And it's a nice way to share resources, maybe not necessarily the platform you're going to use for running your yoga session in the morning, but sharing recipes, sharing pictures of your pets. That's a fun one. Craziest thing that people's kids did today. And also memes. It's a really fun place to share memes, you know, just to kind of get out your emotions and share them in a really fun way, and kind of, you know, commiserate through that. So it's always important. We come from Verasolve from a marketing and PR perspective, so we're always going to say it's important to promote your culture on your website and also utilize social media. And this is important not just for, you know, your prospects and prospective employees, business partners, and your followers. Of course, it's important for them to, you know, see how you're putting your values to the test. But it also really helps your employees become brand ambassadors. If they don't pay attention to every little detail of what's happening in your newsletter, maybe they'll catch what you're doing on social media, and then they can share that through their social media. So it helps them promote your company's culture through their own methods, and it just spreads the word even further. It also helps with buy-in. It helps them believe in what you're doing, and again, shows that you're living your mission and values, and you're, you know, actively pursuing those. So we typically see clients using LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. It's great to use all of those resources. It's, you know, a great free advertising for your company. Pinterest is another really fun one if you want to start sharing some ideas in a visual manner. It's almost like an interactive idea board. So these are some ideas. Are there any other ways that social media methods people have been using these days that they want to share. Feel free to share them in the chat. So I see a question. I think we'll bring that question to the end, but thank you for your questions and keep those coming as well, because in about a couple of minutes, we're going to be taking audience questions. So on the left, you can see just an example of how you might set up an interest channel on Slack. My colleague Megan recommended her chocolate chip cookies because we're both, gaining the COVID-19 pounds. I don't know about anybody else, but we've just given up on that at this point. So we're like, let's just keep the baking going. And I shared my favorite chili, that's fire, and I got to use an emoticon with fire, and it was very exciting. So here we have, it's a great place to share recipes, and that again is an easy one. Favorite books, favorite TV shows, anything that you can do that really works for during quarantine is always great, and then it can go beyond that as well. On the right, we have an example of an employee spotlight. So if you include an employee spotlight in your newsletter, it gives an employee some recognition, makes them feel heard, but then also helps their colleagues get to know them a little bit better, and you can learn some information that you may not have known about the person. So maybe Lauren is from Mississippi, and somebody is reading this and says, oh, I didn't know anybody at this company was from Mississippi, and they can connect in a more organic way. It's almost like an icebreaker in that regard, so it serves a lot of great purposes. So building virtual communities, that is similar to this concept of affinity groups. So I don't want to go too much into some of the ideas, and we're running a little bit over time, but basically when you develop virtual clubs or groups, they can kind of come about organically, where people are sharing the fact that they've all watched The Bachelor, and you can have maybe like a Bachelor watching club. I know Kristen likes The Bachelor, so everybody can share the things that they already like doing. Maybe everybody likes to read mystery thrillers, and that causes leadership to kind of pay attention and say, let's start a book club for that. Or it can be really proactive on the part of leadership, and they can create some more general groups that people can get engaged in. Make sure everything you do is pretty easy these days and a low barrier to entry. And also make sure it's not required, especially if it's out of the office time. People are experiencing this pandemic in really different ways. Some people are feeling isolation, loneliness, boredom, but then other people are like feeling like they're maxed out and they can't expand anymore into their free time. They just don't have the bandwidth for it. So just be sensitive to that and offer different options and make sure certain things are optional, especially the fun stuff. So here's just some other ideas, some types of hobby groups that you might want to start. Exercise is a good one. I don't know if you saw, but Peloton shares are up, I don't know, like 60% or something like that. A lot of people are investing in home exercise equipment. So because you can't do your Fitbit 10,000 steps outside necessarily as like a company kind of walking club, but maybe you could do some sort of exercise bike club. Hiking could be fun because you can recommend some like hidden trails in the DMV area that people might not know about. Again, cooking's really easy. A lot of people are cooking. Anything creative, an art, music, or a knitting group would be fun. Movie and TV, almost everybody's Netflixing like all the time. And then online gaming, a lot of people are playing different video games. And I saw some of our audience members mentioned trivia through Kahoot and other platforms. That's a ton of fun and a really easy thing to get involved with.
Awesome. Thanks, Alana. Thanks for all the ideas. Appreciate it. And let's see the results from that poll about the newsletter and employee engagement. So 20% yes, internal, they have a newsletter. I'd say okay. So there's some people that are wishing they did. Okay, well, I'm sure some of these tips here can help you with that. And we're all here because we're trying to improve our employee engagement efforts. So hopefully that'll improve after this. So now we're going to open it up to some questions from our audience. So Katie, can you open that up? And let's see what we have. So I know we had a couple of questions already. So Rob, can you repeat the online tools that were helpful? I think you mentioned Kahoot or something like that.
Rob,
You're muted,
please.
Yep,
Thanks.
absolutely. So Kahoot, K-A-H-O-O-T, is a great software system. It's primarily originally made for educational purposes, but they've got a great platform for trivia being run remotely. So you could check that out. It's pretty affordable. Then there's also CrowdPurr. So Crowd, C-R-O-W-D-P-U-R-R. And it's also a very robust trivia platform. It's a little bit more expensive. And of course, if somebody works with Fray, they get access to that as part of our services. But if they're doing it on their own, those are two really good software systems.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. Is that where all the toilet tissue went? Yes, it's my background. I'm hoarding it, so shoot me a note if you need any.
Thanks, Paul.
So we had another question for Kelly. So Kelly, how are you planning to protect employees that are required to be on site with customers? Have you guys ironed that out?
Yeah, so we've been very fortunate in that, I think I mentioned we were a government contractor. All of our customers went remote and we didn't have any essential workers. So everyone has been able to telework. Our plans right now, for the headquarters office, we're going to have to adhere to what our clients want for the people going back to the client site. But for headquarters, we did order thermometers where you can hold them in front of your face basically and take everyone's temperature. The interesting thing about that is you can't discriminate of whose temperature you take. So you have to make sure you take everyone's temperature. We're also not going to allow visitors for the foreseeable future. We're also looking at probably a 50%, I'll say, rotation in, rotation out. So we have about 50% of our workforce in the office at any given time just to reduce the exposure. We did go in and measure all of our desks. I think I mentioned, luckily the side-by-side desks are more than 6 feet apart, and we do a lot of people in offices, but we have standing desks, and when the standing desks are raised, you actually you're closer than 6 feet and the wall doesn't go up quite as high. So we got to figure out how to do that, and we'll probably have to maybe shuffle people around if they need to be in the office the same day. But then we also bought hand sanitizer stations, so we're doing that. We're probably going to minimize conference meetings in the conference rooms, and maybe limit one person in the kitchen at the time. So we're just starting to think through a lot of it this week. There's probably so much more we can do, but those are some of the things that we're starting to do now.
Awesome, thanks, Kelly. Someone also, Tom, asked which roles are represented on B&A's crisis management team.
Yeah, so, if we needed to pull in additional people as necessary, we would, but it's our president and CEO, myself, I oversee all talent and operations, our director of HR, and our general counsel.
Got it. Okay, so do you see a delay in the government awarding contracts?
Whew. We're waiting for, a bunch right now. So they're not necessarily delayed yet, but if we don't start seeing some awards this month, yes. We did do a virtual orals, so that was very interesting. So the government is still continuing to put those things out and move forward. We thought that the orals would end up getting delayed, but they wanted it virtual and we did it virtual and it was a success. So we'll probably see more of that. But as of right now, I would say no, but we do anticipate, seeing some delays.
Awesome, thanks, Kelly. I have a question for Ilana. So how can people get feedback from employees on their engagement efforts? Like, what do you recommend to basically benchmark how you're doing?
Yeah, that's a great point. It's always helpful to have some data at your fingertips whenever possible. We work with clients all the time at Verasolve to help them develop different strategies, but SurveyMonkey is a really great resource for more formal surveys, and we recommend keeping it really short, as short as possible, with a few questions that, make sure when you're emailing it to people, you say, this is only going to take 4 minutes of your time and it's only 6 questions, just to make sure, you get that buy-in and that they know it's going to be quick. And just gauging, you know, are we doing enough? What was your favorite activity? What do you wish we were doing more of? Ask those kinds of questions. You can also do it more informally. So if you're having a virtual happy hour, you know, the person running it at the end could just ask 1 or 2 questions like, is this a good time for everybody? What are you hoping we'll do in the month of May? You know, are you into the idea of Cinco de Mayo? So just kind of gauging that level of interest at some of the things you're already doing by asking a couple of quick questions. Those are some things to get started with.
Awesome, thank you. Well, I think that's all the questions that we have for now. You guys can see all the contact information on the screen. So if you have any follow-up questions, you know how to reach us, and we'll obviously be following up as well. Katie, do you want to wrap it up?
Sure. Okay, just making sure that that share went through well. So once again, thank you to all of our panelists, Rob, Alana, and Kelly. You guys are great. Kristen, as always, you know, good team moderating. But I did want to share some information on the Moxie Award. Many of you have probably already heard about it. It has been used by, you know, previous winners and finalists as actually an engagement tool with their clients. It's something they can be proud of and celebrate as a team on. So did want to share, here's the website, moxieaward.com. This is the actual application page. As you can see, it's pretty straightforward. If I can scroll. Okay, there we go. Technologically impaired. So it's free to apply. It's super easy application process. As you see, we collect some just, you know, standard data. We want to know why your company is bold or innovative, or why you have Moxie. And that's really kind of what we're looking to pull out. We've pulled out a lot of really, really cool, awesome stories over the years that we've been doing this. So feel free to check out moxieaward.com. As you can see at the top, there's, you know, the ability to scroll through. You can see past winners from 17 through 19, gallery from all the different types of events that we've done. And I'm sure you'll see that there's a lot of respected peers and businesses that you already know that have been involved, you know, for multiple years with some of them. So we encourage you to apply. It is free, it's easy, and it is certainly a way to kind of celebrate yourselves and your company and your employees and talk about what you
especially
guys are
now.
doing. Especially now. So it's a good positive activity that you can, you know, bring to the forefront. So Kristen, I'll go back to
share it. Yeah, share this with your peers. If you know of a company, you know, please feel free to share the link with them.
Kristen, do you want to pull the final contact slide back up again?
Oh, sure will.
You get to see all of us. And then just last thing, keep an eye out for a follow-up email with the link to the webinar recording, as well as a quick survey. You may be prompted on exiting today to participate in the survey. If not, you know, that will come within the next day or two. So if you want to share this webinar link with anybody, that'll be included in the email, or feel free to reach out directly. And if you do participate in the survey, we thank you in advance and appreciate it. So once again, thank you to everyone, Rob, Alana, Kelly, Kristen, all of our attendees, and we hope everybody stays safe and well, and hope that we can all see each other in person soon. So thank you and take care.
Thanks, guys.